CBS Austin News begins with breaking news.
There have been 121 ayes and 23 nays, 2 present not voting, 3 absent. The resolution is adopted.
In a historic vote, the majority Republican Texas House votes to impeach Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. This follows a legislative probe that faulted him for a years-long pattern of misconduct. CBS Austin's Michael Adkison was at the Capitol today as this vote happens. He is live now with this historic vote. Michael.
Adela, you could hear gasps in the chamber as the voting board lit up green, showing something like 4/5 of the entire Texas House of Representatives voting to impeach Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. A historic end to the legislative session as Paxton now faces a trial in the Senate and possible expulsion from office.
History being made in Texas in real time. Today, the Texas House of Representatives takes up articles of impeachment against Republican Attorney General Ken Paxton, the highest level impeachment in Texas in more than a century. And by an overwhelming vote, with many Republicans joining Democrats, Attorney General Ken Paxton was impeached by the Texas House this afternoon.
And either this is going to be the beginning of the end of his criminal reign, or God help us with the harms that will come to all Texans if he is allowed to stay the top cop on the take.
Earlier this week, a panel of House lawmakers introduced 20 articles of impeachment against Paxton, alleging counts of bribery, obstruction of justice, unfitness for office, and abuse of public trust, and new allegations of retribution even up to today.
Several members of this House, while on the floor of this House doing the state business, received telephone calls from General Paxton personally, threatening them with political consequences in their next election.
AG Paxton has repeatedly denied the claims of the investigation, calling the process highly partisan and false.
The corrupt politicians in the Texas House are demonstrating that blind loyalty to Speaker Dade Phelan is more important than upholding their oath of office.
And he called for his supporters to peacefully demonstrate at the Capitol. Minutes before the House convened, more than 100 people lined up to witness history, many in support of the Attorney General. In a last-minute statement, former President Donald Trump posted on Truth Social, his own social media platform, calling House Speaker Dade Phelan a rhino, Republican in name only. Going on to call the proceedings election interference, something Paxton, too, has insinuated. U.S. Senator Ted Cruz is supporting Paxton as well, writing virtually all the information in the articles were public before Election Day last November, when voters re-elected Ken Paxton to a third term. Under the Texas Constitution, after a House impeachment would come a trial in the Senate, where Republicans have a similar stronghold. That includes Paxton's own wife, Angela, who serves as a member of the Senate, possibly unfolding what could be more drama in a monumental finish for the legislative session.
From here, Governor Greg Abbott will be notified of the move for impeachment towards Attorney General Ken Paxton, and then the articles will be referred to the Senate. In the Senate, there will be a trial. We haven't heard much from Abbott, nor have we heard from Dan Patrick, who presides over the Senate and will act as more or less of a judge through that process, Adela.
Yeah, Michael, this vote wasn't even close. Can you break down those numbers for us and tell us what led this Republican majority to largely vote that way against a Republican AG?
Adela, you're exactly right. This vote, I've got the vote tally right in front of me. It came down 121 votes in favor of impeachment to just 23 against the impeachment. That means that there was significant Republican support. There's only around 60 Democrats in the chamber, which means something like 60 Republicans voted in favor of impeaching the Attorney General, including House Speaker Dade Phelan himself, who rarely votes on legislation, but he decided that he was also in favor of the articles of impeachment. You may remember that this whole escapade began earlier this week. We first learned of the investigation when Paxton had called on Phelan to resign. I will also mention there was one sole Democrat, who did not vote in favor of impeachment, but decided that he was not going to vote in the matter, saying he wanted to leave it to the courts, Adela.
General Ken Paxton, he emailed a statement to all of us, actually pushing back on this, also releasing the reports. What does releasing the reports get him, and what does his pushback say?
And Adela, you were at that press conference yesterday, as was I, and we know that Paxton has been pushing back on these allegations essentially all week. And if you want to stretch back to when the allegations first arose, he's been pushing back pretty much since then, years and years ago. But really, he's been insinuating that the committee did not do a correct job in investigating these procedures. And he has also said that they were not given enough notice, which is what we also heard on the House floor today. And he also argued that he himself in his office were not given opportunities to speak correctly to the committee. I will note, though, this committee only began investigating when Paxton himself had requested taxpayer funds to go towards a $3.3 million settlement with whistleblowers. He went to lawmakers, asked for taxpayer funds to go towards that settlement. This committee then began investigating, probing into the background of that settlement, and that's where we are today after these articles of impeachment were issued and now voted upon, passed by the House of Representatives. Adela.
And let's talk about suspension. You mentioned this briefly. He will be suspended. Does that happen immediately? He did send out that statement on official Attorney General letterhead.
That's a good point, Adela, and we were working to figure that out. The question at hand, as you mentioned, is in the Texas Constitution. It says that anyone who has been impeached by the House of Representatives is suspended from office until a verdict comes from the Senate. The question is whether that happens as soon as the House passed it or did not. From what I heard, it does sound like it is immediate. There's nothing indicated that it would take some time. We likely will know more if and when Governor Greg Abbott would name a temporary replacement to fill that role of Attorney General. That's arguably the next logical step in this process. Should he come out and name someone as the replacement, the obvious implication would be that Ken Paxton is no longer filling that role from the time being. And as mentioned, from there, it would come up to the Senate to decide whether or not to convict him or to put him back into office. Adela.
All right, thank you very much. Michael Adkison reporting from the Capitol. He is going to have much more on this tonight at 10 o'clock. Thank you, Michael. Let's talk about Ken Paxton, long under a dark cloud since his first campaign in 2014 on at least two separate matters. The more recent matter concerning a donor and whistleblowers in his office first came to light in October of 2020. It is unrelated to the first case, but ended in a settlement for wrongful termination for that $3.3 million Paxton asked for, which led to this. Allegations of fraud first emerged in 2014 and legal proceedings began in 2015 on a fraud case unrelated, but they have been stalled for years.
So we have an attorney general, and we have since he was elected pretty much, who has been indicted on fraud charges. How did that not disqualify him from office in the first place?
For those, for legal reasons, it's important that people who have not been convicted of crimes not be prevented from running for office.
And once again, Ken Paxton not actually convicted. You can follow we're going to have the timeline tonight at 10, a breakdown of everything that's happened since 2014. You can follow these latest developments in this breaking news online and on air at cbsaustin.com.